Hey there. So a ton of you have asked for the next guide to be for Susano, so that's exactly what we're going to do. So as always with my god guides, I'll be splitting the guide up into subsections to make it easier to digest. I'll have timestamps on screen and in a pinned comment down below for each section if you just need a specific bit of information, but otherwise just sit back and enjoy the whole guide. So first up we're going to cover Susano's basic playstyle, what he's about, why you would want to play him and what he's good at. Then we'll go in depth on all of his abilities, covering what they do and the best ways to use them. Then items and builds, where I'll discuss my favourite items for Susano and conclude with an example build for jungle. And finally we'll close out the guide with some tips and tricks to up your game on Susano. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's dive right into his basic playstyle and overview. So Susano is built as a highly mobile but very squishy burst assassin. Essentially meaning he does absurd amounts of damage in a short period of time and will use his mobility to get around the map, chase down targets and escape fights safely. But if he gets caught out, he's very easy to kill due to his lack of defenses and good crowd control. So the way you need to play Susano is based around this. You'll want to be nimble, hopping around fights, looking to pick people off and avoid getting focused or CC'd by the enemy team. You're usually best at single target damage with Susano, but he does have some capabilities to do AoE damage as well. Susano plays like most other assassins in the game do, so if you like other assassins, you'll probably like him too. Alright, so with that done, let's move on to covering Susano's abilities in depth and a leveling order for him. So first up, Susano's passive, Gathering Storm, is a simple one. Essentially, Susano gains a stack every time he casts an ability. At 4 stacks, his next ability does 25 plus 60% of physical power in bonus damage. These stacks will drop off if he uses no abilities in 5 seconds though. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is a simple passive that you don't really need to pay attention to. It's easy to keep stacked since all you need to do is cast an ability every 5 seconds to keep it topped up and have it ready for a fight. You'll often be clearing jungle camps, and since this passive only activates on enemy gods, you can just stack it up 4 times killing jungle camps and then activate it on your next gank for some bonus damage. Moving on, Susano's first ability, Storm Kata, is a 3-parter. Essentially, Susano makes 3 attacks with his sword. The first does damage in a cone, the second does damage in a circular area around him, and the third allows him to dash forward. The first 2 attacks do the full ability damage, while the dash portion of the ability only does half damage. This ability hits for 40 up to 140 plus 55% scaling per hit, but keep in mind that the actual damage of the ability is 2.5 times that number if you hit all of the attacks. It also has a 16 second cooldown, scaling down to 12 seconds depending on ability rank. So this ability seems more complex than it actually is. Once you use it in game, it's really intuitive. And also a big point with this though is that like Nemesis's dash, you can use other abilities, basic attacks and relics and stuff in between the hits, so you're not locked into the entire ability once you start casting it. Once you cast the first hit, you can right click on PC, not sure what the equivalent on console is, and it will delay the ability so you can use your other abilities and basic attacks. This makes it great for auto attack cancelling and just generally makes it very versatile. It will end the ability if you don't cast the other parts within a few seconds though, so be careful with that. On to Susano's 2, Wind Siphon. Susano attacks all enemies in a cone in front of him, dealing damage and pulling enemies in the centre portion of the cone towards him. This does 80 up to 180 base and 60% scaling in damage, and has a 16 second cooldown regardless of rank. So this is definitely his most simple ability. The only thing to really note with this is that you only pull from the centre, but it is pretty easy to make sure you land the pull with this, so I won't really worry about it too much. This is his only form CC outside his ultimate, so you gotta make sure you're using it wisely in fights. Susano's 3, Jet Stream, allows him to hurl a gust of air forwards. This stops at the first enemy hit and follows them, or at maximum range if he doesn't hit anything. The storm then does damage every 0.75 seconds for 3 seconds, so 4 ticks of damage. It does 20 up to 60 base plus 30% scaling per hit, so effectively 80 up to 240 on 120% scaling, and has a cooldown of 16 seconds. Susano can also choose to reactivate the ability again at any time within 3 seconds to teleport to the storm, regardless of if it hits anyone. But if you do teleport to an enemy, it will reduce the cooldown by 8 seconds. Just adding this in afterwards because I don't think I was really clear enough on how the cooldown actually works for this. It sets the cooldown to 8 seconds instead of 16. It doesn't actually reduce the cooldown by 8 seconds. So if you buy a load of CDR, you won't end up with a 1 second cooldown ability. In fact, it's the opposite. Buying CDR for this ability is sort of redundant because if you're using it aggressively, it's going to be 8 seconds regardless of what CDR you have. So on top of the dash on his 1, this ability gives Susano incredibly strong mobility. If you're using it to chase and hit an enemy, it only has an 8 second cooldown without CDR, which is insanely strong. The damage is decent too, considering it also doubles as mobility. This is best used aggressively to get that reduced cooldown, but it also can be used to run away since you don't actually need to hit anything to teleport to the storm. This can also provide another great AA cancel for Susano as well, since you can cancel with the initial throw and also with the teleport. And finally, Susano's ultimate, Typhoon, allows Susano to summon a hurricane at his location that grows in size over time, increasing in damage as it grows. If the storm is at least half its maximum size, it will also knock up all enemies it hits. Enemies caught in the storm as it grows will also be slowed and sucked towards the centre. This ability can be activated at any time for reduced damage and potentially foregoing the knockup. It'll take 2 seconds to fully charge, so after 1 second you get the knockup. This does 215 up to 475 base damage and 140% scaling in damage and has a 100 second cooldown. So this is an insanely strong ultimate for an assassin to have. The damage is really good at nearly 500 base, and that 140% scaling really hurts once you get some items online. It's also Susano's main lockdown outside of his 2, since it provides CC to people caught in the storm, and also that huge AoE knockup once it's charged is insane for teamfights. Just a little something to be aware of. Alright, so let's quickly cover Susano's leveling order before we move on to his items and builds. So level 1 you want to take Jet Stream for jungle. While the 1 technically does more damage, you can trigger the Jet Stream cooldown reduction on jungle camps, so it actually only has an 8 second cooldown while clearing, versus 16 seconds on the 1, that's why you take the 3 first. Level 2 takes Storm Kata. Having this gives you really good level 2 damage and jungle camp clear, and in very specific niche situations the 2 can be good at level 2, but for the most part you usually want the 1. Level 3 take Wind Siphon so you can have some lockdown and CC for those level 3 fights. Level 4 take Storm Kata again for more damage, and then level 5 take Typhoon for obvious reasons. From there you want to max out the 1, then the 3, then the ult, and finally the 2. Alright, so let's move on to Susano's build choices. So I'm going to be approaching this from a jungle perspective. If you're playing him in other roles or game modes, you may need to adjust this build slightly. So starting builds, you want Assassin's Blessing in jungle, then you want a tier 1 item you want to rush early, so Mace for a Crusher rush, Morningstar for a Hydra's rush, etc, and then fill up on potions. For me, I almost always go with Mace on 1 health and 1 mana potion, since I like to rush Crusher early on Susano, but it's really up to you. Susano's boots are always warrior tabi, don't ever get anything else in jungle. Susano's scalings are crazy, so he makes really good use out of the 40 power from these, as opposed to the extra attack speed or movement speed from something like Ninja or Talaria. From there, you want to finish whatever tier 1 item you got at the start into a full item. So for me, I usually finish Mace into Crusher, but you can also grab things like Jotun's Wrath, Heartseeker, Hydral Cement, Brawler's Beatstick, or even Transcendence if you're feeling ballsy. Though Transcendence is usually better as a 3rd or 4th item, not a 2nd, but it's an option. Then the rest of the build will consist of a combination of these items I just mentioned, plus a few other options. Titan's Bane if you want to deal with tanks. Magi's Blessing is great since Susano has no built-in CC immunity and can often get focused out by hard CC. Spirit Robe and Mantle of Discord are good for general purpose defense if you feel you need some. Bloodforge is decent if you're really far ahead and can reliably get kills in fights. Void Shield and Anchila are good hybrid items providing some defense and some offensive stats all in one item. And finally, Shifter's Shield is not bad since Susano really uses the high power effectively, though it's not my favourite choice on him. As for relic options for Susano, you usually want beads and then either Blink or Aegis. I wouldn't stray away from these 3 if I were you. You need beads basically every game, and then your other relic is either Blink or Aegis depending on what you think you'll need. Personally, I like to go for the Blink to make the aggressive plays, but if you're against like a Scylla or something, you might want to go Aegis. Alright, so let's cover a quick full build example before we move on. Start with Assassin's Blessing, Mace, 1 health and 1 mana potion with beads as your relic. Grab Warrior Tabi, then finish your Mace into the Crusher. Then get Transcendence, Hydra's Lament, Magi's Blessing, and finally Bloodforge, with your second relic being Blink. Alright, and finally let's round out the guide with some Susano tips and tricks. So I've touched on it briefly, but auto attack cancelling on Susano is your best friend. It allows you to get little bits of extra damage in that really help you beat out other assassins in trades. They're especially effective when you have Hydra's Lament as well. Good AA cancels are between the segments of his 1 and on his 3 as well, though you can AA cancel with the 2 and ult is just less good. You can get an insane CC chain that can't be DR'd on Susano by ulting, then pulling enemies into the storm with your 2. This gets them stuck in the slow and pull and then confirms the knock up on them from the storm. You can also use this if an enemy jumps out of or away from your ultimate. Pull them back into range of the Typhoon before firing it for a nice CC chain. Since both Susano's CCs are knockups, neither are affected by diminishing returns, which is really nice. While it takes a while to get the hang of it, a really nice combo with this and Blink can really catch people off guard. Dropping your ultimate preemptively, letting it charge a bit, and then blinking in, pulling enemies in by surprise and hitting them all with the storm can be a really good way to catch out unsuspecting enemies. It can also be done over walls for that extra surprise factor and style points. Also, it's a small thing, but you can get an edge coming out of the fountain by casting your 1 up to the dash, then 3ing, and then teleporting and dashing afterwards. This just saves you maybe 2 or 3 seconds coming out of fountain if you need to be fast as opposed to just using the 1 or the 3, why not use both? Alright, that's about it from me though. If you did enjoy the guide and learned something new, then please do drop a thumbs up, my dude. These guides take ages to make, so any support on them is greatly appreciated. Sorry this one was a little shorter than some others I've done. Susano is only really viable in 1 role and has a very narrow build path, so naturally this one is a little bit shorter than like a Baron guide who's viable in 3 roles and has a very diverse and varied build path depending on the role and stuff, but I hope this one was still useful to you nonetheless and you got something out of it. Share it around with any other people you know that want to learn Susano and check out my other God Guides playlist for all my other ones that I've done so far. If what you want isn't there, then drop a suggestion in the comments for what god you want me to cover next. Susano was mostly done because you guys wanted it. But anyway, I'm out. Peace out, nerds.